evening, good morning, good afternoon. It is pleasing to see that many Zimbabweans have come to the right conclusion that 17th November 2017 was Zungu Day, or as the gentleman wearing the t-shirt there is showing, National Mistake Day, Dumb Day. It was a dumb day. The people were conned to believe a lie. And that has been a problem. And it is pleasing that some people have realized that they made a mistake that day. Well, what was the mistake? It all started with the announcement of the coup by a familiar face, Major General Sibusiso Moyo. All started on the 15th of November, with small hours, when he and a group of other Zimbabwe Defense Forces stormed and took over key offices and went to Mugabe's house, and he was told that he was under arrest. The announcement by Sibusiso Moyo was that the coup had taken over because they wanted to get rid of the corrupt individuals around the president. Indeed, stamping out corruption was cited as one of the key things that they were going to achieve. And the people believed them. They came out in the hundreds of thousands, celebrate free, fair, and credible elections. Again, the people believed them. And the people came out in their hundreds of thousands in support of the military coup. So what was the mistake? Well, the mistake was in believing that the military coup was going to bring about any meaningful change. That was the mistake. People should have known that the people who are staging this coup are part and parcel of the Zanu PF dictatorship. This coup was an internal matter. It had pitted the faction of war in Zanu PF had pitted the Lacoste faction against the G40 faction. The Lacoste led by Emerson Mnangagwa and the G40 led by Mugabe himself. This was a fight for which faction was going to control. And under those situations, anyone should have guessed that this factional war, whichever side wins, it will make no difference to the ordinary person. This was no different from two hyenas fighting. The goat has no business in siding with one side or the other, because he can be certain of one thing. If the two hyenas make their peace, they will want to celebrate it with a feast, goat meat. If one of them was victorious, it doesn't matter which, he too would want to celebrate his victory with a feast. And the goat is on the menu again. So either side, it's irrelevant. In our case, we should have known better. We should have known that whether the Lacoste faction prevailed, we will have a dictator. If Lacoste prevailed, we'll have a new dictator in the form of Mnangagwa. If the G40 prevailed, we'll still have a dictator, albeit this time Mugabe or somebody else would come in. So we had no business to be involved in that, let alone come out in the street and support the coup. We should have stood firm with our demands for the implementation of democratic reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. That should have been our position, and we should have never moved an inch from that. We did not. We thought supporting G40 or the Lacoste faction would serve our best interest. As we know, Mnangagwa did prevail. He came into office, and unfortunately for us, none of the promises he made ever came to light. He promised to stamp out corruption. As we know, corruption under Mnangagwa has increased. It was bad enough during Mugabe's time, but under Mnangagwa it seemed to have gone into overdrive. And what is worse for us is that the looting has made Mnangagwa and these cronies incredibly rich. Now they're in a position where they are bribing everybody, right, left, and center. there is no doubt that trying to bring about any meaningful change in Zimbabwe is going to be we seem to be having some problems here with the system. Corruption has gone up, and Mnangagwa and his cronies have become incredibly rich. And one of the things that they've managed to do is bribe everybody, from Povo with chicken and chips to village heads with motorcycles, chiefs, twin cab cars, the MPs and senators. They were bribed before the 2023 elections with US 40,000 housing loans. Just another word for bribe. And they scaled it up. At the time we got to the judges, it was 400,000 US dollars. All the judges got 400,000 US dollars. Deputy ministers, 230,000 US dollars. Ministers, 500,000. And all for one purpose: to ensure that this Zanu PF wins the 2023 elections. So corruption has made Mnangagwa and his cronies incredibly rich. And they can afford to splash the money around to stay in power. Getting change now is even more difficult. And that is the truth. What Mnangagwa has done since the 2023 elections is throw onto the national agenda the view that he is going to try to extend his stay in power beyond 2028 in violation of the present constitution provision that says he cannot serve more than 2 successive terms. This is not an issue, and Zimbabweans should not even be interested in it, because it's again another big mistake to consider it a big issue. I'll tell you why. If we do succeed in stopping Mnangagwa changing the constitution and extending his stay in power, what will that do? It will stop Mnangagwa himself becoming the dictator beyond 2028. But it will not stop Zanu PF rigging the 2028 elections and imposing a Zanu PF dictator. In other words, this is just repeating the mistake of 2020, 2017, where all we managed to do is remove Mugabe only to get Mnangagwa, swapping one dictator with another. I honestly don't think that is where we should be going. And yet, that is exactly what is happening here. The opposition leaders, the likes of our friend Douglas Monzora, they've been re-energized by this Zanu PF ED 2030 issue. He had his star as an opposition leader had faded, but this seemed to have re-energized him. He is now involved in a court challenge and is portraying himself as a constitutional law guru. Revving it up as much as he can. Again, I emphasize, stopping Mnangagwa, extending his term of office, will only mean Mnangagwa himself will not become the dictator beyond 2028. But as long as Zanu PF participates and rigs, and people participate in the 2028 elections, and Zanu PF is guaranteed to rig those because there's not even one token reform that has been implemented, we will end up with a Zanu PF dictator. And we are repeating the same mistake because all we seem to be doing is succeeding in stopping dictators. But other than that, nothing changes. We should not be obsessed about dictators. What we want to end is this Zanu PF dictatorship. That's a totally different ball game. We want to stop the Zanu PF dictatorship. Stopping one dictator and only swapping him with another is not what we want. It doesn't accomplish anything for us. That is what we did in 2017, sorry. And we don't want to be repeating that. Yet, when you look at the spirited way some of the opposition leaders have taken up this whole issue of stopping Mnangagwa, you realize they are going to galvanize the nation to participate in 2028. And let me tell you, if we were to remain focused on the issue of either implement the democratic reforms to make sure 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible, or else we do not participate, the end result of that is Zanu PF is not going to implement reforms because it is well established that Zanu PF will never reform itself out of power. That I think many people will accept. And secondly, it's not likely that any meaningful reforms can be implemented this late. We have only 3 years to go before the 2028 elections. What matters, therefore, is campaigning to make sure that people are not conned into participating 2028 elections in the same numbers that participated in 2023 and before that 2018. Because if we do not participate, SADC will deny Zanu PF political legitimacy. They've done that before. 2008, it was SADC that refused to recognize Zanu PF's victory, that forced Zanu PF to go into the GNU. If that was to happen again in 2028, it will mean we will have a GNU. And the GNU is not a Zanu PF dictatorship. So whether Mnangagwa had beforehand succeeded in amending the constitution or not is irrelevant, because a GNU in 2008 will mean we will not have a Zanu PF dictatorship. We would have saved ourselves the agony of making yet another mistake. That is the point. So the T-shirt that my friend here is wearing, National Mistake Day, 17 November 2017, if the truth be told, it wasn't a one-day affair. We've made many, many mistakes in many, many other days. In some cases, we've repeated the same mistake a number of times. We are about to repeat the same foolish mistake of participating in 2028 only to get one dictator instead of the other. To me, it is irrelevant. Just as it was irrelevant whether we got Mugabe or Mnangagwa in 2017. Because what we wanted was to end the dictatorship and replace it with a healthy and functioning democratic system of government. And we made the mistake of believing that if we get one dictator out, we'll be well on our way to getting the democracy that we want. We're about to repeat the same mistake. Because we never seem to learn. Tragic. That is really tragic.